Mr. Spivey?
Excused.
Mr. Baines? Mr. Baines?
Excused.
Mr. Baggett? Mr. Baggett?
Yeah, I see him.
Well, I see him present. Mr. Baggett, can you hear me?
Yep.
Thank you.
All right, a quorum of the Board of Education is present, so the regularly scheduled meeting of May 3rd, 2021 is called to order. We will now have the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand and face the American flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Tonight's agenda has previously been distributed to the board. I would entertain at this time a motion and a second, which I got from Mr. Korberg and seconded by Ms. Como, to approve, unless there is a motion to amend. Is there a motion to amend? Okay. So then hearing from, moved by Mr. Korberg, seconded by Ms. Como, to approve the agenda, we will have a roll call vote.
Mr. Abraham? Ms. Baumann? Ms. Como? Dr. Cooper-Stoll? Ms. Leahy? Mr. Lee? Mr. Korberg? Mr. Jimenez?
Aye. Next, we'll have public speakers. It is the policy of the board to provide at its public meetings an opportunity for individuals to address the board. Comments about individual staff and personnel will not be allowed. Open meeting law prohibits the board from engaging in discussion or responding to matters not included on the agenda. All speakers are reminded that this same policy limits your time to speak to 5 minutes, and this limit will be strictly enforced. If I could ask the superintendent to please keep track of the time and to notify the speaker when the time is running out. Thank you. You're also asked to give your name and the school district where you reside at the beginning of your time for the public record. Our first speaker tonight is Caleb Wiss-Williams.
Good afternoon. My name is Caleb Wiss-Williams from the Crosse School District. I'm here today to talk about WISCOR, and more specifically, the La Crosse Mayor's Crew. WISCOR is a nonprofit, service-based organization dedicated to developing leadership, self-confidence, and work ethic in youths and young adults through the stewardship of Wisconsin's natural resources and communities, and we're headquartered here in La Crosse, Wisconsin. Because we call La Crosse home, and through partnership with the city, we were able to offer a unique opportunity to students in the area, the La Crosse Mayor's Crew. For the past 5 years, the Mayor's Crew has worked on a variety of projects within the city of La Crosse during our 6-week summer session. Some examples of projects we've worked on include Riverside Park bank cleanup, restorations at Chad Erickson Park, assisting with about 40 local homeowners in need for outdoor projects. We also partner with other nonprofits in the area on projects such as trail building and maintenance, invasive species removal, and working in community gardens like those at Kane Street and those in Myrick Park. For our crew members, this is a prime opportunity to earn a wage of $300 per week by working outside for the summer while investing in our local community. 17 and 18-year-olds serving on the Mayor's Crew will also be enrolled in AmeriCorps and earn an additional $1,300 towards higher education. Beyond that, this is also a chance to learn hands-on technical skills, network with other local organizations, achieve personal growth, but most importantly, make an impact locally and develop a sense of stewardship for our community and our natural resources. Unfortunately, due to COVID, outreach to students has become increasingly challenging for us. But we are currently actively recruiting and hiring for these positions right now. But we need help to spread the word and get more applicants. This program is open to all 16 to 18-year-olds who currently attend a La Crosse high school. Our work season runs from June 18th through July 30th, Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. with no nights or weekends. Students simply need to report to Myrick Park Center every morning. Lunch is also provided every day. If you'd like to learn more or know a student who might be interested, I'd encourage you to check out wiscor.org/mayors. That's WISCORPS.org/mayors. There you can see more about our mission and other opportunities that we have available. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Jamie O'Neill.
Hello, my name is Jamie O'Neill and I reside in the La Crosse School District. I have a master's in public health, so I had the good fortune to work with a UWL student this semester, and I wanted to share with you what she found in her research project. Grace Kosh, again from UWL, studied rubber chips on playgrounds and their effects on children. This has been an issue that's been brought up in many communities, and she wanted to dive deeper and see what was there. Grace found that in half of our schools here in La Crosse, we do have rubber chips or rubber mulch on the playgrounds. This, although I'm talking mainly about rubber mulch today, turf or artificial turf with those little rubber BBs, that's very similar and has found very similar, if not even more alarming statistics. In samples of rubber mulch, these weren't taken specifically from the La Crosse School District, mind you, but in research on rubber mulch, most samples contain about 92 chemicals. Half of these chemicals have never been tested by our government. We're finding that when children are playing on them, they are experiencing off-gassing of these chemicals, they're absorbing them through their skin, and they're also ingesting them. Lead is one of the chemicals, but I really want to draw your attention to PFASs, which are polyaromatic hydrocarbons. These can cause eye, nose, and throat irritation, headaches, and also nausea. After chronic exposure of PFASs, which I would say if you're a child from pre-K to 5th grade playing in that is chronic exposure. There has been documented cases of behavior and cognitive delays, slowed growth and development, internal organ damage, cancer, and anemia. We're now able to trace PFASs in some children's urine. And unfortunately, the more access or the more times they're playing and exposed to shredded tires, that does increase the chances of finding this in children's urine. Apart from that, on hot days, these rubber chips have shown to sometimes cause thermal burns and also wire cuts, as when we're recycling these rubber tires, sometimes not all of the metal gets taken out of them. If you're worried about fall ratings, both wood chips and rubber chips are rated equally. If you're worried about equity, know that our 2 elementary schools with the highest free and reduced lunch rates have primarily rubber surfaces. If you're looking at our high schools, the high school with the highest free and reduced lunch rate and also the highest minority rate is the school with artificial turf. After looking at this research, Grace, I, and her professor would really like to encourage the La Crosse School District to look at replacing rubber chips with wood chips. Both the Minneapolis and Duluth School District have looked at this issue, and 3 years ago, their school board voted to replace all rubber chips with wood chips. When looking at the alternatives, wood chips does not have this chemical exposure. Some people look at pour-in-place rubber and want that to be the alternative. But I want to give you 3 reasons why I'd like you to think differently. Pour-in-place rubber is made out of similar chemicals. Some people think poured-in-place rubber is more inclusive. But if you look where we have rubber chips, if you pour in place rubber, maybe somebody in a wheelchair could get 2 or 3 feet closer to monkey bars or swings or a slide that they can't go on anyway. So in our playgrounds, I would argue that it would not make it more inclusive. And lastly, the cost. Pour in place rubber and rubber chips, the expense actually is when we have to take them away. The more rubber surfaces we put on our playgrounds, the more expensive it is to dispose of them. Landfills do not want rubber tires, and unfortunately, that's why they ended up on the playgrounds in the first place. I'm not blaming anyone. I was one of those who thought 10 years ago this was a genius way to recycle things. What I would ask of the board is to please support Joe Lavina and his team at Building and Grounds. They're aware of the concerns of rubber mulches, and they're looking at putting it in the budget. We do need to prioritize this. And I would like wood chips, when he's looking at alternatives, wood chips to be the replacement. Secondly, as your long-term planning for your facilities, which I think is happening maybe a little bit today, please do not choose artificial turf, pour in place, or rubber surfaces for children at play. If this is too big for the school board to handle alone, remember you have a community. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next item on the agenda is the recognition of the 2020-2021 student representatives, Evan Baines and Danny Baggett. And so I just wanted to say thank you to both of them for their service to the board and bringing the voice of students to our table, and we've really appreciated the contributions of both of them, and I'd like to give each one an opportunity to speak.
Thank you guys so much for this opportunity. It's been excellent to represent students this year, and I've been so glad to make sure that you guys have been able to consider our opinions.
All right, thank you very much. Yeah.
Board members comment.
Yes, please.
Mr. Baggett, I just wanted to say that of the student reps that have been on the board in the time that I've been here, you have perhaps been the most proactive in terms of the research that you have conducted and the information that you have shared with the board, and I just wanted to thank you for that.
And I'd like to say I appreciated your document that you had shared with us today. I think that'll really help going forward as to some ideas as to what we may want students to be looking at when they are our representatives. I kind of skimmed it. I didn't get a chance to go over it thoroughly, but a very good job done, and thank you for doing that, and thank you for all your attendance at our meetings and for providing your comment.
Any other board members who'd like to comment? Okay. Hearing none, thank you. We'll move on to the approval of the superintendent's consent agenda. The consent agenda is a mechanism used by the board to deal with routine business that must come before the body. Are there any items that the members want to remove from the consent agenda?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the items on the superintendent's consent agenda as presented.
Second.
With a motion by Ms. Como and seconded by Mr. Korberg, the items on the superintendent's consent agenda are approved as presented. We'll have a roll call vote.
Mr. Abraham? Aye. Ms. Baumann? Aye. Ms. Como?
Aye.
Dr. Cooper Stoll? Aye. Ms. Leahy? Aye. Mr. Lee? Aye. Mr. Korberg?
Aye.
Dr. Jimenez?
Aye. We'll move on to the board consent agenda.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the items on the board consent agenda as presented.
Second.
With a motion by Mr. Korberg and seconded by Ms. Como, the items on the board consent agenda are approved as presented. We'll have a roll call vote as well.
Mr. Abraham? Aye. Ms. Baumann? Aye. Ms. Como?
Aye.
Dr. Cooper Stoll? Aye. Ms. Leahy? Aye. Mr. Lee? Aye. Mr. Korberg?
Aye.
Dr. Jimenez?
Aye. We'll now move on to the Operational Expectation Monitoring Report, OE12 facilities. I'll turn it over to Dr. Engel.
Thank you so much. Unfortunately, Mr. Levina could not be here to make that report today, dealing with a loss in his family. So sad that we can't have him here for that, because he is certainly more knowledgeable than Patty or I, but we will do our best to cover down. Ms. Sprang will lead off and take us through the OE monitoring report, and I will chip in where I can add fruitfully.
Sounds good.
So this is OE12, our facilities report. For the most part, it is a summary of the 19-20 school year. So the first one, indicator 1, the capital facility improvement maintenance plan.
Ms. Sprang?
Yes.
For our new school board members, maybe just like a brief rundown of OE monitoring might be helpful. I can do that myself, or if any of our board members wanted to.
Yeah.
I mean, do you have something in mind beyond what was covered at orientation in terms of governance structure?
No, I just think it's an opportune time. So we developed the OE monitoring reports, was it last year in May and June? And so these were the result of new policies. So the school board has a policy OE12, and it's our obligation to follow through and ensure that we're meeting the terms of that policy. And so this is an opportunity for us as the administration to present the evidence that we are meeting the expectations of the school board. And so our job right now is to present evidence to that point. And so this is a great opportunity for the board to ask questions, to learn more, to ensure that we are being held accountable to that policy and that standard. And so Ms. Sprang and I will go through this relatively quickly, but do not hesitate to interrupt or hold your questions to the end, whatever you feel most comfortable with. And we're happy to have a discussion to add more information, to explain further.
Okay, so as I said, it is the facilities report. So evidence number 1, the capital maintenance and improvements CMI project report. Joe does this on an annual basis, and it is a 5-year projection for our buildings, where there are, what capital maintenance and improvements are anticipated in the next 5 years. Indicator 2 is also the capital maintenance and improvement project report that supports the items from the previous year, that they are presented annually. Indicator 3, that all schools have a condition assessment annually. This evolves into the capital maintenance and improvement project report also. So this report supports a lot of the evidence that we have put in place. Indicator 4, the district identifies schedules and conducts required preventive maintenance. So attached here are our agreements that we have with vendors that do our maintenance on an annual basis. Let's see, indicator number 5, the safety reviews. We do a safety walkthrough at each building by each building engineer. And of course, any potential injury or life safety concerns are addressed and fixed. Those are immediate life concerns. There are no concerns at this time, and all the annual state mandated safety reports have been submitted. So we do have to send those to the Wisconsin Department of Justice, Safety, Office of School Safety. So then, following that is develops and maintains a long-range facility plan. So we have, of course, been in that process, and you are all aware. So we attached the draft of the facility needs assessments that was brought to you on March 1st, or it was completed on March 1st, but it has been brought to you. And then the capital maintenance, and again, the CMI project report also supports that measure. For OE 12.2, the board receives system design alternatives for all system replacements. So during this time period, there were no system replacements. However, they did perform a life cycle analysis on the solar that is part of the Hamilton School project. So that is attached there. Then on OE 12.3, the district passes all required annual inspections. So that is a statement saying that we have passed all annual inspections. The district completes all scheduled maintenance. We have a statement that we have scheduled the maintenance. Then the district maintains a work order system. So if you open that up, that is actually the current year work orders that were identified and completed. We have a system that reports on that area. Then during the student occupied hours, 100% of facilities utilize their controlled entries. So all of our buildings that have students, that are occupied by students, have those controls in place. Here at Hogan, we no longer have students in the building, so we do not have that, so we've met compliance. 100% of identified violations per the fire department and state inspection are corrected. There actually haven't been any violations, so there's a statement there that shows that we are in compliance there. And for 1920, there was no state inspection. That's kind of random. The district maintains, on OE 12.4, the district maintains facility use policy, so that we have attached a copy of that policy. The use request process and rules are easily accessible to the public. That is on our website. We connected that area to the indicator and the annual community integration facilities use report. So that years ago was brought to the board on an individual basis as an information item, but that fits nicely as an indicator evidence in this case. 100% of misuse of facilities are addressed for indicator 3 and indicator 4. All of the items were returned to pre-rental condition. We have had no reports of any damage or misuse of our facilities. Number 5, facility use was monitored and all events were conducted safely and appropriately in accordance with the policy. So there's a statement that that is true. And we also have a software, our schools today, which people use to reserve our facilities, and we've attached that statement. For OE 12.5, all major construction or renovation activities are presented to the board and approved by board action. So during 1920, these were all brought to the board, and the dates that they were brought to the board are attached. So that was the La Crosse Polytechnic School remodeling, Hamilton renovation, and the Central Sutton Gym air conditioning project. Let's see. For OE 12.6, the board is briefed on all recommended land acquisitions, and we have had no land acquisitions for the 1920 school year. OE 12.7, indicator 1, all contracts and projects are administered so that construction change orders are rarely needed, and if so, does not significantly increase the project costs or reduce the quality of the project. So the evidence there is attached for the change order that was brought to the board on February 17, 2020. And let's see. And then the last one, I believe, is the board is briefed on any schedule changes, and there were no schedule changes or change orders that were made that increased cost or reduced the quality of the projects. So that was a lot to take in. Any questions?
Do the board members have any questions for Ms. Spring?
I don't have any questions. I do have a couple of comments. Please convey to Mr. Ledina our condolences on the part of the board, first of all. And second of all, when Mr. Ledina has come forward annually to present his report, it has always been extremely thorough, very detailed. And so I imagine that even though the report is not new, the template is new. I can't imagine it was not difficult for him to move that data into that format, because he's always just, again, provided so much and done it in a way that's very easy to follow, and that we have really appreciated that.
Thank you. Mr. Corbett?
Yeah, I just have two things that I want to ask. On 12.1, indicator 3, about capital improvements being done, has there been anything done in particular or kind of out of the ordinary for the buildings that we're kind of looking at down the road that might be under either major repair or not be in the district anymore?
We're judiciously approaching projects in our oldest and least well-built buildings, pending the results of our facility plan. So we're certainly making any improvements that are related to safety or inclusion, but we are not embarking on a significant roofing project if it's under scrutiny this year. A lot of that's deferred maintenance that could happen this year or in 3 years, and so we're just taking the time to pause on some of those larger projects on those sites until we know for sure our direction.
That's what I kind of guessed, but I just wanted to ask that. And then under 12.4, indicator 2, building use, one of the things Lori was talking about, how this material is coming to us each year and differently. I would like to see next year, and I don't know if we need to add that in one of the indicators itself, that we kind of look at comparing years 5 years ago or a year ago, so we can kind of trend and see if the community is using our buildings and if there's something that we can do to make sure that they're using it more, or I'm sure COVID, I'm sure changed everything and that the numbers are all off. But I think in the future, it might be beneficial to have some kind of a trend to see what kinds of, what's being used and potentially what could be used better or even be added to the mix. That's the only comment I have.
Good suggestion.
It's not
I'll
a
let you know.
criticism, it's just, I think it's something that kind of, was kind of overlooked as we're changing into the new kinds of measures that we're looking at.
Yeah, for other sorts of data, our goal is a 3-year kind of comparison, so we can look back a few years back.
Yeah.
So we can certainly look into that for building usage as well.
Okay, that's all I have, thank you.
Other board members?
I'd like to make a motion in regards to the monitoring
I don't think
report.
there's any action this time around, it's just information. No vote tonight.
Oh, sorry, it was on the bottom.
That's all right.
I was reading ahead.
No, we will have a vote at the next meeting, but thank you, Ms. Como. If there are no other comments, then we'll move on to the results monitoring report, R3.6, involved citizenship. Dr. Lehutke?
Good evening. Tonight's results policy 3.6, I would call a sequel to results policy 3.5. I'll follow Dr. Engel's lead where he did a brief description of the OEs. Now, the results policies fall under two main categories. The first are academic results. So for our two policies, you'll generally see standardized test results or assessment data. For R3, the focus or the category is active citizenship. So each of the results policies under R3 revolve around active citizenship. And tonight, for those who may not have R3.6 in front of them, I'll read. Students will demonstrate awareness of the ways historical and current systems of oppression work together to produce injustice and identify strategies for addressing these systems of oppression: racism, sexism, homophobia, transphobia, and ableism. Active citizenship is the combination of knowledge, attitude, skills, and action that contribute to a building and maintaining a democratic society. Active and involved citizens know and make a difference at the local, state, national, and global level. Schools play a critical role in developing active citizens. For the purpose of the interpretation, we use curriculum-based assessments. It's a bit ironic that I defined the results policy 3.6 about results, and tonight I don't have results. What I do have is a process of how to generate those curriculum-based assessment results. There are two types of curriculum. The first are your overt curriculum. We could list the resources that we use in a particular classroom. We could list the scope and sequence to see what topics are covered. That's the overt curriculum, that's visible. The other aspect of curriculum is the hidden curriculum. This may result in the educator's skill, disposition, talents, leaders, district, how we contribute some of those softer side to the curriculum so that students can build connections, see themselves in the curriculum, and know that they're cared and loved for in our schools. It takes both of these in tandem to have success. The School District of La Crosse Strategic Plan for Educational Equity has elements specifically related to the overt hidden curriculum. Educator knowledge, skills, and dispositions, curriculum, system of support, district and building leadership, and community collaboration. Last month, I spent some time talking about essential standards and grading for learning rather than arbitrary grading practices that most of us in this room have been experienced all of our lives. So first, the essential standards. That is the work that's ongoing. When I say I don't have results, it's what I don't have are strategic, or I would say intentional, formal assessments to generate the data that you're looking for. These type of discussions occur informally in our classes throughout the district. We are identifying essential standards. If there's one positive outcome of COVID, and that seems like a funny thing to say, is that that educators, our systems realize that we just cannot teach every standard. Instead, we have to focus on those essential standards, those ones that have the biggest payoff for student learning and ensure mastery for all of our students, so that we still teach all the standards, but the mastery of these essential standards is something that we're working on. Grading, arbitrary grading practices permeate our educational system, not just La Crosse, but nationwide. If we think of an example, when I was younger, or actually even when I was a teacher, if a student turned in something late, I generally took away points. I penalized the student for, not because they didn't learn it, but because they didn't turn it in on time. Those are two separate things. If we grade for learning, time is a variable, learning is a constant. We can grade those behaviors separately, differently from learning. So we can grade for behavior, we can grade for tardiness, we can grade for attendance, and provide feedback, I should say. Not grade like A, B, C, D, F, something like that. But provide feedback about those soft skills that we want in our students. But the learning should be graded in a way that demonstrates actual learning of the standards. Our social studies department and ELA department have taken the lead when it comes to results policies 3.6. Social studies is a little further ahead because our standards were introduced, I should say the ELA standards are relatively new, and we're just trying to wrap our arms around them. Our social studies standards that are listed that contribute to policy 3.6 that we will develop assessments for in the upcoming year are listed below. May 7th is our next meeting for our ELA department, and I anticipate we'll have standards associated with ELA that we'd be able to add to this report going forward. So it's not just two data points, but we'll have multiple data points from different content areas. That is my report tonight for results policy 3.6. Are there any questions you may have?
Any questions from the board members?
Yes. All right, Dr. Lahecki, as you mentioned, this is more about process, so I have a question. So you have listed here the essential standards. And so what data do you anticipate that will be presented to the board at some point based on those?
Sure. In the end, it'll be the report card data.
Okay.
So whatever assessments we generate, it won't be a multiple choice test per se. It could be some sort of project. Any way you can demonstrate learning will be described in a way on a report card that I can bring to you with the overall summary of how students are doing in different reference groups and overall. Right now we're at the process of determining what those proficiency scales look like. Sometimes it's I've mastered it, I'm approaching, I'm at beginning, I'm at minimal skills related to it or not yet. But that we're still working on as well.
So each student would get a grade on these essential standards, and we could roll those up to compile them, as a whole for all students. And
you said it better than I did, yes.
Thank you, Dr. Lahecki.
Other board members? Dr. Lahecki, I'm very curious to see how this rolls out. I know other places have talked about the same thing about how when we grade, we sometimes will take points away from lateness, but if a grade is a contract that shows mastery or competency of something, then reducing the grade because of lateness doesn't really match that. And so I'm glad to hear that those conversations are happening. I'm also curious to hear about how assessments will be looked at as well, because I think that all of that goes hand in hand. So thank you very much for your comments.
Thank you. We're not the first district to go down standards-based grading. We're learning from others and collaborating with others. These are tread waters. This is a tread path that we are learning from others.
I have one more question.
Yes.
Dr. Lahecki, I'm curious, as we've been in conversation about these results reports, I'm just curious to know, do you feel like you're drilling down a little closer to what it is that you hope to get at in terms of those metrics and sharing those with the board? I know you've talked about some of the challenges of trying to find good measures for those policies.
Yeah, so I think each results policy has if I had to do it all over again, There might be some that I would take a different approach to, but I really want to take an opportunity to present it to you to get that feedback first. I am particularly excited about what the standards-based grading will generate as far as a results policy, but more importantly, what it will do for student learning. It is one of the absolute best things we can do for student learning is to have clear learning targets. And that's what the essential standard work can do.
Thank you.
There's no other comments? Thank you, Dr. O'Huckey. And this will, the official vote on this one will take place in the fall with the complete results monitoring report, just so that the board is aware. And we will move on to our next agenda item, the 2021-2022 proposed budget and administrative goals. Is that Dr. Engel?
That is me. So part of our proposed budget includes some top-line administrative goals that we're pursuing. I submitted goals that looked very similar to this last year in fall, and that's because our goals are relatively the same. These are big things. So I aligned them with our school board's results policy and kind of distilled that into a couple of more fine-pointed goals. So you can see in that document the school board results policies, each of those 1, 2, and 3. And so the administrative goal related to results policy 1 is all students graduate college and career ready, and student outcomes do not correlate with student demographics. For results policy 2 related to academic performance, of course, there's lots of academic performance, but my emphasis is on reading proficiency, so all students read proficiently. And results policy 3 involves citizenship. These aren't exactly derived from the involved citizenship results, but they nest within it and kind of derive out of the operational expectations. And they are all students feel like they belong, all students are engaged. If we're doing the work of results policy 3, then our students will feel involved or engaged, and they will feel like they belong.
Are there any questions from the board? Hearing none. The only thing I would say is I would be interested to see about all the results policy number 3 involves citizenship, about all students feeling like they belong. I think that is something that we should definitely strive for, and so I'd be very curious to see how we go about measuring that.
Absolutely. I think, Dr. Harsey, we've got some surveys that we students take annually that get to that question. And then there's the YRBS, the Youth Risk Behavior Survey that's given annually or every other year that also helps kind of triangulate that sense of belonging. So we've got some good measures in place. Maybe you could speak more to that, Dr. Harsey.
Well, it was part of OE10. There was a few questions that address that, and then we'll be taking the Youth Risk Behavior Survey again. It normally is a spring assessment, but it got pushed to the fall this year due to COVID. So we actually just registered our schools today, and we'll be taking it now in the fall of this year. Our window is late October and into November of 2021. So we'll be seeing more along those lines.
And then my goal this upcoming year is that our directors' goals and our building school improvement plans align with these goals as well, so we have some unity of direction as we move forward.
There's no other comments from the board, then we will move on to our announcements. And we will start off with communications from the student representatives to the board, so we'll start with Mr. Baggett.
Awesome. I wanted to say thank you again for the opportunity this year, and I've got 3 announcements for you tonight. Firstly, we held a convocation. Awesome. Tons of seniors getting scholarships to be ready for college, and we were able to provide an online option, just live streaming through the Logan High YouTube channel. So anybody who didn't feel safe coming to the ceremony was able to attend and pick up their scholarships at a later date. Secondly, prom this last weekend. I know a ton of people had a ton of fun with in-person prom, saw a ton of photos on social media, and just a great time. I'm really glad we were able to hold that this year. And for anybody who didn't feel safe, I was able to work with a couple other students, and we put together some resources, playlists, dance, tons of things, even some 80s rock. So we're definitely spanning the genres for anybody who wanted to celebrate prom however they feel safe at home. And then thirdly, I have put together a list of everything I've done this year. And the two things I'd like to point out are a shout out to a group chat that I've made. This has just been a sounding board for me throughout the year for any ideas that I had, or if I just kind of needed to get a quick pulse on how people might feel about something, whether it's a schedule change or a survey. So thank you very much to Gwen Schrader, Pachi Vang, Nick Ballou, Nathaniel Green, Leah Mattingly, and Mason Sather for helping me out this year with this position. And then the other thing that I'd like to point out about the list is that on the very last pages, there are some suggestions for tools I'd hope that we can provide for future student reps, and just a lot of advice for any future student reps.
Well, any questions for Mr. Baggett? The only thing I would say is that I would echo what Dr. Cooper Stoll shared earlier, that, of the school board reps, there haven't been many that I've been with since I've only been here. This is my third year, but I've really appreciated your insights, appreciated how thorough a job you have done as a school board rep, and so I really just thank you very much for your time and your efforts. Next, we'll move on to the announcements by Ms. Baumann for the La Crosse Public Education Foundation.
Sure. So I have some, although I'm officially meeting with David next week. But this week it's Teacher Appreciation Week, and the La Crosse Public Education Fund is doing a couple different things to, lift up our teachers. This week, they're awarding grants to teachers. 175 nominations were received by the La Crosse Public Education Fund for Shining Stars. Of those, 130 were unique staff members. And 3 grants were awarded this afternoon by surprise. And the names were Anna Jordan, who's a teacher at Soda One, Roxanne Hickey, a school nutrition specialist at Lincoln Middle, and Heath Bernheimer, who's a teacher assistant at Northside Elementary, Cooley Montessori. There are more awards going out. I think they said they're selecting 10 others who will receive gift cards over the course of this week. In addition, the Random Acts of Kindness Forever Fund exceeded the goal of $400,000 in gifts and pledges. This was due in large part to the Franciscan Sisters of Perpetual Adoration matching gifts received since February 22nd up to $25,000 total. So there's a lot of good work going on, and Brad offered to fill in some of my areas that I missed as he was the farmer.
I asked Eddie if I could talk about the Random Acts of Kindness Forever Fund because of its great success. I think its goal was originally, was it $250,000 was what the board set at that time. And I want to give you some numbers, and these are not, this isn't my idea, this was what David did for us, and I thought it was quite impressive. The first number he relayed was 388, and that refers to the $373,000 that the foundation has raised so far in gifts and pledges. The next number he said was 29,548, and that's the dollar amount of donations that qualify for that Franciscan Sisters $25,000 match. So blew that out of the park as well. Next number is 38, and $38,000 is the amount of the investment growth that the foundation has already seen in the Random Acts of Kindness Forever Fund just since they began depositing funds last April. So obviously in a little over a year, $38,000 on top of what they've raised. And then 451 is the number that when you add it up, the Random Act of Kindness Forever Fund should stand at $451,000 or more by January 1st of 2023. And then he shared one number The last number he shared was the number 8 turned on its side. And my wife got that one right away. She said, I remember that from math club, or math class, that's infinity. And of course, this means that our students are going to benefit in infinity thanks to Tom Thompson, Roger LeGrand, and Scott Mahalovic. Those 3 worked on the campaign to make it a success. And as you can tell, it was a success. And so the good news is come 2023, we won't be having to raise money for random acts of kindness. It'll be funded through an endowment that will be there forever for our students to benefit from. So thank you, Andy, for letting me mention that. It was a big accomplishment that I know we talked years ago when we sat down and said, how the heck are we ever going to raise $250,000? And then when we started to do it, lo and behold, COVID came, and we're like, okay, how are we going to raise $250,000? And we're up to 451. So lots of success, and thank you to David and the rest of his team for doing that.
Yes.
Any questions for Ms. Bauman or Mr. Korberg? Seeing none, we'll move on to my announcements. The only announcement I have is for those board members who want to take their picture next week, or excuse me, the next meeting, May 17th at 5:30. We will have that opportunity, and Nick Marker will be here to take pictures of the board members for this upcoming year. So thank you very much. And we'll move on to Superintendent Engel.
I just have a couple things. First, in the consent agenda, we had 2 administrators hired. Greg Fenton, he's the supervisor of special education. He served in that role this year as a one-year interim with COVID and everything else. We wanted to see if it was a viable position. There's flow-through funds through the federal government to fund that position, so we were able to make it full-time and had a full interview process to hire him in that role. And then the other individual is the Central High School principal. We hired Jeff Axness, who is currently the associate principal there, for that role. So we're excited to have both of those gentlemen on board in those positions.
Wonderful.
Oh, and then the last thing, graduations are coming up. The 2 best days of the year are the first day of school to me, and then the second best day is graduation for our high school seniors. And there's an opportunity for board members to participate in that event if they so desire. Laura will be reaching out to survey your interest on those dates in question. So I'm excited to put on a suit and then a robe and then a hat and get all dolled up. So
Thank you very much. And we'll move on to agenda planning.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the May 17th, 2021 Board of Education agenda with any additions or corrections.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Korberg and seconded by Ms. Como to approve the May 17th, 2021 Board of Education agenda with any additions or corrections. Could I have a roll call vote, please?
Ms. Abraham? Aye. Ms. Bauman?
Aye.
Ms. Como?
Aye.
Dr. Cooper-Stoll?
Aye.
Ms. Leahy?
Aye.
Mr. Lee?
Aye.
Mr. Korberg?
Aye.
Dr. Jimenez?
Aye. And we'll move on to the board debriefing. And can I turn it over to Dr. Cooper-Stoll?
Thank you. Okay, so quickly, just for new board members, the purpose of board briefing is to focus specifically on board performance for that particular evening. Different school boards do debriefings in different ways. If you look at the content on board docs, it provides some examples of how different school boards might want to engage in the practices. But in general, the questions that we want to take up during the debriefing are a reflection on what our board did well for the night, what are things that we need to improve on. And I also like a question that Sun Prairie uses in their debriefing, which is how much time do we actually spend talking about students versus talking about process? So I have some thoughts about how much time we might have spent on that this evening versus process. But one of the things I do want to address that I think that we can improve on moving forward is and also for the benefit of new board members. So when the monitoring reports come forward, they should include data that the administration, led by the superintendent, has identified as ways to reflect that they are working to meet the policies that the board has set forward. The superintendent has great latitude in deciding what those metrics are going to look like. When they come forward with the actual data for us to look at, then that gives us an opportunity not only to reflect on whether or not it is in compliance or not in compliance or compliance with the exceptions, but also to discuss whether or not that data gets at what the board was aiming for with their policies. Because we may find, and this is one of the things I appreciate about what Dr. Lahecki said tonight, this is not a sort of set forever process. This is something that we should be in evaluation of annually and throughout all of our meetings as well. However, we don't change things midstream. The administration is given the latitude for the year in which they're actually monitoring those reports to bring that data forward. So even if the board decided, or a board member thought that we should consider something separately, that wouldn't come forward until we actually discuss whether the findings and whether or not, again, we think that the findings accurately get at what the policy says. And the reason that I bring this up is it seems like in the last few board meetings we've had comments from board members about how those metrics might be improved upon. For example, looking at 3 years versus looking at 1 year, or changing that. And I appreciate those trends as well. But the one thing I'm thinking about is we also have board policy that says a board member cannot direct the superintendent individually. I would suggest that as we move forward, if board members have suggestions about, if the administration is asking for those suggestions and board members have them, that is an item that gets added to the agenda for discussion and then voted on. Because otherwise, I think we run the risk of you could have 9 board members requesting 9 different ways. And so even if the administration is asking for that feedback, I think that is one way to make sure that we are staying within our policy, and also the fact that we're not all over the place and that is more streamlined. And with regards to that policy, one of the things that was included on the agenda tonight was the administrative goals. And I see that Ms. Steigerwald has included how those goals reflect specific policies of the board. But I would also, while the debriefing is specifically for board performance, this also allows the opportunity for me to share that I think particularly for newer board members, it also might be helpful to actually contextualize while we're talking about administrative goals in the board's agenda for the evening. Because sometimes when we open that up for questions, I think it can invite questions that might get the board straying into an area that is really the domain of the superintendent and not the board. So I think just providing that context might be helpful. With that, I would just ask if there are any comments that board members want to make specifically about board performance this evening. Again, things that worked well or things beyond what I have shared that need to be worked on.
Any board members would like to chime in?
Then the final thing I'll say is just a congratulations to Dr. Jimenez for successfully leading his first meeting as president. You had far fewer hiccups than I did when I ran probably my first 3 or 4 meetings. So that was something that went very well for the evening.
Well, thank you very much for that. I think we have a very good board, and I think as we continue our process of continuous improvement through our policies, I think we will all learn and grow together. So I appreciate having you on board as a governance officer. With that, I believe we are done. So we are adjourned. Thank you very much, everyone.